Namaste, Hersh.
Namaste, Namaste ji. Good morning, everyone, and Namaste. Let's start our Tuesday class with the prayers first. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhur Bhavaswa, Tatsavitra Varenyam, Vargo Devasya Dhimahi, Diyo Yo Nah Prachodayat, Asto Ma Satgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, Mrityurma Amritam Gamya. Om Sena Bhavtu, Sena Bhunaktu, Saviryam Karvavai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahi. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Let's open our Uddhava Gita books. And we'll start reading from verse number 8 in chapter number 13. The perfection of spiritual knowledge. So this verse is spoken by Uddhava, the student. He says, Jnanam Vishuddham Vipulam Yathet Vairagye Vigyan Yutam Puranam Akyahi Vishweshwar Vishwamurte Twadbhakti Yogam Cha Mahad Vimrigyam. Uddhava said, O Lord of the universe, O form of the universe. So he's saying this to Lord Krishna. O Lord of the universe, O form of the universe, please describe the perfect eternal knowledge that results in detachment from all that is material and awards one direct perception of reality. This shows how important the Vairagya is. Without Vairagya, no knowledge. This highly sought after knowledge describes devotional service unto you. Not being satisfied with the knowledge of self-realization that the Lord had presented so far, Shri Uddhav now inquires about the rarely understood process of devotional service. The absolute truth is beyond the reach of the empiric philosophers. Shri Uddhav said, O Lord of the universe, the universal form and its opulence that you manifest are temporary and therefore illusory. Now kindly tell me about the pure and unadulterated process of devotional service that is sought after by great sages, such as Shuk and Sanaka. Those who have been able to lift themselves above the illusion of material existence are called Mahat, or very great personalities. Here, Shri Uddhava expresses his desire to hear about that knowledge which has been sought after by such great personalities. So we always have to have some kind of an ideal in our mind so that we keep on progressing. That's what Uddhava is doing. Tap त्रयेनाभिः तस्य घोरे संतप्य मानसः भवात्वनीश पश्यामि न अन्यश्च शरणं त्व अंगिरिः द्वंद आत्परदात् अमृतः भीवर्षात्. My dear Lord, one who is caught up in the vicious cycle of repeated birth and death and thus suffers the threefold miseries of material existence, for him the only shelter is your lotus feet, which are like an umbrella that showers nectar. So threefold miseries of material existence, that is Adi Bhautik, Adi Devik and Adhyatmik. Threefold miseries of material existence. One might question, being satisfied with spiritual knowledge, what would one gain by inquiring about the process of devotional service? Herein, Lord Krishna gives a suitable reply. The lotus feet of the Supreme Lord are most pleasing to that heart, and they shower nectar upon the devotee. The nectar is more relishable and sweet than the happiness derived from Brahma realization. The lotus feet of the Lord are just like an umbrella that shades one on the tortuous path of material existence. Indeed, there is no other comparable shelter available in this world. Shri Dhruv Maharaj presented this statement, which is found in the Shrimad Bhagavatam. My Lord, the transcendental bliss derived from meditating upon your lotus feet or hearing about your glories from the pure devotees is so unlimited that it is far beyond the stage of Brahmanand, wherein one thinks himself merged in the impersonal Brahman as one with the Supreme. Since Brahmanand is also defeated by the transcendental bliss derived from devotional service, then what to speak of the temporary blissfulness of elevating oneself to the heavenly planets, which is ended by the separating sword of time? Although one may be elevated to the heavenly planets, he falls down in due course of time. In this verse, Shri Uddhava is inquiring about the most blissful process of devotional service, which is more relishable than the happiness derived from Brahma realization, which is attained by the cultivation of knowledge. This formidable material existence is filled with threefold miseries. Those who are traversing the path of material existence are constantly afflicted by other miseries. The lotus feet of the Supreme Lord protect the devotees from the scorching heat of aversion to his devotional service, just like the cooling shade of an umbrella. There's another verse spoken by Uddhava, verse number 10. Dashtam janam sampatitam bile asmin kalhin shudra kushudra sukhor utarsham samudrenam kripyaha pavagay vachobhiram asicham mahanubhav. My dear Lord, please mercifully deliver this miserable living being who has fallen into the dark well of material existence and has thus been bitten by the snake of time. In spite of a horrible condition of life, the miserable conditioned soul is mad after attaining insignificant sense gratification. Please deliver me by your nectarian instructions, which bring one to the path of liberation. One should follow in the footsteps of the pure devotees of the Lord to make his life perfect. There is no necessity for cultivating knowledge that is simply a negation of material variegatedness in the hopes of attaining realization of Brahman. Even if one is not a pure or exalted devotee, he should sincerely pray for the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Without the mercy of the Supreme Lord or his eternal servants, one's personal endeavors for liberation will yield no fruit. If one's cultivation of knowledge is free from desire for personal gain and is aimed at understanding the absolute personality of Godhead, it becomes fruitful. Those who have not yet attained the platform of pure devotional service may acquire such knowledge in order to free themselves from material bondage. The Lord's mercy is practically manifest by the instructions he gives, such as the Bhagavad Gita and Uddhava Gita. In this verse, Uddhava prays to be bathed in the shower of the Lord's nectarian instructions. This is the purport of this verse. Here, the true condition of material existence is being described, although the happiness one gains from sense gratification is very insignificant. The conditioned soul has an insatiable desire to enjoy it. This mad desire to enjoy the dull material world is certainly due to the influence of the illusory energy of the Lord. Instead of enjoying the happiness he desires, the conditioned souls. And what is a conditioned soul? Jivatma. The soul which is conditioned by the upadhis, body, mind, intellect. It's a conditioned soul. The conditioned souls continually suffer in the dark well of material existence. It is in the best interest of everyone to renounce the false prestige based upon bodily identification and beg for the mercy of the Supreme Lord. The Lord is not a dead stone. So he hears the sincere appeals of the conditioned souls and mercifully helps them by his divine instructions. So God listens. We got to have that faith. Whether we are worshipping the God in any form, God does listen. Verse number 11, now Lord Krishna is answering Uddhava. Itham etat purar raj bhisham dharm vritam varam ajat shatru prachach sarvesham nu shrinvatam. The Supreme Lord said, my dear Uddhava, formerly King Yudhishthira, who considered no one as his enemy, inquired just as you have now from the great authority on religious principles, Bhishma, while we were present. And we read about that in Mahabharata also, how Yudhishthira asked these kind of questions to Bhishma Pitama. निवृते भारते युद्धे सुहृन निधन विहुला श्रुत्वा धर्मान बहुन पश्चान मोक्ष धर्मान अपृच्छत. At the end of the battle of Kurukshetra, King Yudhishthira was afflicted with grief because of the death of so many well-wishers and relatives. And thus, after listening to many discussions of religious principles, he finally asked the same question regarding the path of liberation. Verse number 13. Tan aham te vidyasyami dev vrat makhach shruthan gyan viragye vigyan shraddha bhagatya up brihintan. Now I will describe to you the religious principles governing Vedic knowledge, self-realization, renunciation, faith, and devotional service. Gyan, Vairagya, Vigyan, Shraddha, Bhakti, which were heard directly from the mouth of Isha. See, look at the humility of Lord Krishna also. He's Lord. Uddhava is saying that you are God. But he is not saying that I am going to give you something new. Even in Bhagavad Gita, he says, I'm not telling anything new. It has been told and practiced by other yogis. So over here also, even though Bhishma Pitama was on the enemy side, but still there are wisdom in the enemy also. Sure, he made some mistakes, but wisdom was there too. And that's what Lord Krishna is pointing out over here. Let's look at verse number 14. What he's telling us, what Bhishma Pitama said. Navekadash pancham trin bhavan bhuteshu yenva ikshetaha thaikam apiyeshu taj jnanam mam nishchitam. I approve of the various philosophical understanding that delineate a combination of 9, 11, 5, or 3 elements in all living entities, and ultimately one supreme element within all 20. The knowledge by which one understands the 28 elements comprising material nature, the spirit soul, Mahat Tattva, false ego, 5 sense objects, 11 senses, 5 material elements, and 3 modes of material nature. To be ultimately non-different from the personality of Godhead is approved by Shri Krishna. Actual knowledge is to understand that the super soul is the cause of all causes and thus the origin of these 28 elements. So these 28 elements which we learn in the Sankhya philosophy is enumerating over here. The 9 elements mentioned here are material nature, the living entity, the Mahat Tattva, false ego, and the 5 objects of the senses, sound, touch, form, taste, and aroma. The 11 elements mentioned in this verse are the 5 working senses, speech, hands, legs, anus, and genitals. 5 knowledge acquiring senses, ears, touch, eyes, tongue, and nostrils, and the mind. So 11th one is the mind. The 5 elements are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And the 3 elements are the 3 modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance, satvikta, rajsikta, and tamsikta. All of the living entities in this material world are embodied by these 28 elements. The one supreme element within all 28 is the all-pervading super soul, which we call Paramatma. Number 15. Etat ev hi vigyanam na tat eken yen yat sthiti utpatyehe apyan pashet bhavna nam trigunatma nam. When one no longer sees the 28 material elements, but rather sees the super soul, from whom these elements have emanated, his understanding is called Vigyan, or self-realization. Every materially created form transforms in 3 stages: birth, existence, and destruction. Okay? So something grows, and then after that it's sustained, and then it's destroyed in this material world. In this verse, Shri Krishna describes Vijnana, which is the mature stage of Jnana. So Vijnana, sometimes we use the word Vijnana as this material science also, but over here this Vijnana means mature stage of Jnana. Okay? On the platform of Jnana, one sees the material elements in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but on the platform of Vigyan, the super soul is directly realized in his own abode. Upon realization of the super soul, who exists beyond this cosmic manifestation, one ceases to study the material elements. Because to study the material elements is the means, and the goal is to know the super soul. This is the culmination of self-realization. The objects of this material world are created by the 3 modes of material nature and are subjected to 3 phases. They come into being, remain for some time, then are ultimately dissolved. So these are the 3 stages: birth, growth, and death. Therefore, the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the cosmic manifestation is a temporary manifestation of the Lord's inferior potency and not ultimate reality, which we call Prakriti. Those who are wise realize this on the platform of Vijnana. Okay, so this is the realization we got to have. Verse number 16. Adav ante ch madhye ch srijyat srijyam yat anviyat punas tatpati sangrame yat chishyet tad eva sat. Creation, maintenance, and destruction are the stages of material causation. That which consistently accompanies all these material phases from one creation to another and remains alone when all material phases are annihilated is called Sat or eternal existence. So whatever kind of a creation it is, it will go through these three. So once it's created, after sustaining for some time, ultimately it will dissolve or destroy. In this verse, the super soul, the original cause, is being further described. Although all created things can be understood in terms of cause and effect and are temporary manifestations having a beginning, a period of manifestation, and an end. The original cause is eternal. Original cause, the super soul or God, and remains even after the total annihilation of the cosmic manifestation. So that means even after the complete pralaya. Pralaya doesn't mean that God dies. The super soul remains. That's why it's called eternal. The Mahat Tattva is considered to be the cause of the creation, but it is not the cause of all causes. Okay, so Mahat Tattva, that is like a cause of this manifestation. But who is the cause of even the Mahat Tattva? The Supreme Lord is the absolute cause of material existence. He is the unchanging reality that eternally exists while everything material goes through constant transformation. We can see that in our own body also. Keeps on changing. Our body is not the same as it was yesterday. Keeps on changing. But there is something in us which does not change. That is the part of that super soul. Ansh of that Ansh. This can be understood by one who cultivates transcendental knowledge under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master. One's understanding that the absolute truth is one without a second should not be disturbed when one hears of the variegated pastimes of the Supreme Lord. When one is on the platform of Vijnana, one's resolute conviction that the absolute truth is the Supreme Personality of the Godhead remains unshakable. Advaya Gyan does not refer to impersonal monism, a conception that views the absolute truth as being devoid of variegatedness. According to such impersonal philosophy, the individuality of the living entity, the distinction between the master and the servant, and their transcendental characteristics are products of illusion. If a conditioned soul cannot appreciate the philosophy of inconceivable simultaneous oneness and distinction, he will certainly come under the spell of Mayavad philosophy, and therefore consider the temporary material world which is a manifestation of the three modes of material nature, to be false. Whatever we see manifested in this world has a beginning and an end. Although the cosmic manifestation is in constant flux, the separated material energy of the Lord is eternal and therefore not false. False is something which does not stay the same, and truth is that which stays the same, no matter what. One who stands on the platform of realization of his eternal self can, on the strength of his acquired knowledge, renounce both the aspiration for material enjoyment, which is, after all, accompanied by so many miseries, as well as dry renunciation of such enjoyment. And that is the Vairagya. So when you know that what is true, what is false, what is permanent, what is temporary, you move towards Vairagya. If one's variegated activities pertaining to life in this material world are dovetailed in the service of Lord Krishna, one will become purified of the contamination of aversion to the Lord. This temporary material world, which covers an insignificant portion of the spiritual sky, can be realized as a place of blissful pastimes of the Lord. But the moment one sees the world as separate from the Lord, and thus meant for one's personal enjoyment, one's Advaita Jnana becomes disturbed. The devotees of the Supreme Lord are very conversant with the understanding of how everything in this world has a beginning and an end. And so they cannot be diverted due to attraction for momentary enjoyment. As long as the devotees are fully engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord with all of their senses, material contamination cannot touch them. However, when one fails to come to the platform of seeing how everything is in relation to Krishna, one may adopt a process of pseudo renunciation. Pseudo. Verse number 17. Shruti pratyaksham edavyam anumanam chatushthyam Parmaneshwa anavsathanad vikalpat sovirajyati. From the four types of evidence, Vedic oral reception, Shruti, direct experience, Pratyaksha, traditional wisdom, and logical induction. One can understand the temporary nature of the material world and thus become detached from the dualities of material existence. After describing Gyan and Vigyan, Shri Krishna now discusses renunciation in this and the following verses. The evidence presented by Vedic oral reception is that the absolute truth is He from whom all living entities manifest, by whom they are maintained for some time, and into whom they enter at the time of annihilation. So where did they come from? Where all this creation came from? Where is it being sustained? And where will it go? The evidence of direct perception is that a pot is made from earth, and when it is broken, there will remain only clay. So the form of the pot is just only in the middle. The evidence presented by historical or traditional wisdom is that those who declare that this material world is false did not exist previously and thus are unauthorized and ignorant. The evidence of hypothesis is to conclude that this material world is temporary So it's not non-existent. It does exist, but it's temporary. It's existing, temporary. Because it has a beginning and an end. Although there is sometimes disagreement between the four types of evidence, they all proclaim that material existence is temporary, and therefore one should develop vairagya or detachment as stated here. Okay, so vivek is that understanding what is temporary, what is permanent, and then ultimately not get attached to something which is temporary. Because when we get attached to the temporary, what happens? Misery. Unless one accepts direct perception, Vedic knowledge, traditional wisdom, and logical induction in relation to the Supreme Lord, one will simply engage in mental speculation while trying to understand the absolute truth. When any of these four kinds of evidence enhance one's spiritual cultivation, they are accepted as being worthy. Simply by utilizing any of these forms of evidence for one's personal sense gratification, one cannot attain auspiciousness. By renouncing objects that could be seen in relation to Lord Hari, one invites inauspiciousness under the banner of false renunciation. However, when one cultivates the understanding that everything can be properly utilized in the devotional service of the Lord, that is considered suitable renunciation. So we should be aware of this false renunciation. Karm naam parinamit-vad a viranchiyad amangalam vipashchina nashwaram pashyedam adrishtam api drishtuvat. This is verse number 18. One who is actually intelligent should see how material nature is subject to constant transformation. So that even in the highest planet in the material world, the planet of Lord Brahma, there is no secure position. That's why we hear about in our scriptures, there have been countless Brahmas also. Okay. One should understand that within the material world, everything has a beginning and an end, just as his experience has shown him. Although heavenly enjoyment is not experienced on this earth, heavenly experience over here means Swargin Sukha. Because we are on this earth, there's a limited Sukha. So although heavenly enjoyment is not experienced on this earth, it can be understood that there is no real happiness there, because life there is also filled with envy, lamentation, and ultimately death. Okay, even though lives are longer, there's a lot more happiness there, but still it's not ultimate. It does end. Residence on any planet within the universe is the result of one's fruitive activities. Sakam karma. Okay, according to our karmas, we'll go at a different place. Good karma, they will take us to good places. The results of karma are always temporary, and thus an intelligent person can conclude that every situation within the material world is temporary and thus fraught with various miseries. Okay, so no matter where we go, there will be miseries. So you have to remember that. The demigods headed by Brahma are under the influence of the three modes of material nature. And yet they are worshipped by those who follow the Karam Kand, sections of the Vedas, and are thus a source of inauspiciousness. An intelligent person can easily understand the temporary and faulty nature of life on planet Earth, and he can also conclude that life in the heavenly planets must be temporary and inauspicious. The results of fruitive activities are not at all desirable for self-realized souls. Okay, so Sakam Bhakti is not looked after, the self-realized bhagats. Unless one comes to this platform, one will continue to remain entangled in temporary fruitive activities. Verse number 19. Bhakti yogaha purirvoktaha priye man aaye te anag punascha katheshyami mad bhakti karnam paramam. O sinless Uddhava, because of your love for me, I had previously explained to you the process of devotional service. I will once again impart to you that sublime means for attaining my pure devotional service. Similar kind of a sentiment we saw in Bhagavad Gita also. The only reason the gurus or the avatars, they teach or they come here on this earth because they love us. Our love brings them. Because of the love, he says, because of your love for me, that is the force which brings us closer to our gurus and the gods. Love. Being requested by Uddhava, Shri Krishna now begins his description of devotional service. Although Uddhava had heard about many aspects of human civilization, including the Varnashram Dharma system, which we saw in detail in the last couple of chapters, the processes of distinguishing between matter and spirit, renunciation of sense gratification, and so forth, he still hankered to hear specifically about pure devotional service to Lord Krishna. And the Lord thus begins to discuss that subject. Now we have 4 verses together, verses 24 to 21 to 24. Adraha paricharyam sarv angher abhivandanam mad bhakt puja bhyadhika sarv bhuteshu manmati mad artheshu ang cheshtaha cha vachsaha mad gunernam mei arpanam cha manasaha sarv kam vivarjanam. Verse number 23. Mad arth parityago bhogasya cha sukhasya cha ishtam datam hutam japtam mad artham yad vratam tapa. Last one. Evam dharme manushya naam udvatma nivedi naam mei sanjyate bhakti anyo artho syav shishya. Firm faith in the nectarian narrations of my pastimes, constant chanting of my transcendental glories, great attachment for my worship in the temple, praising me by offering beautiful prayers, great respect for my devotional service, offering obeisance with the entire body, rendering service to my devotees, seeing me within the hearts of all living entities, offering one's bodily activities in my devotional service, describing my transcendental qualities, offering one's mind to me, renunciation of all material desires, donating one's wealth for my devotional service, giving up material sense gratification and happiness derived from it, and performing all pious activities such as giving charity, performing sacrifice, chanting mantras, executing vows and austerities simply with the desire to attain. Okay, that's a key message over here. Because we do all this or some of it, but we got to look at it. What is in our mind? Are we doing it to desire God or to desire some kind of a name, fame, wealth? These constitute actual religious principles by which devotees who have actually surrendered unto me automatically develop love for me. Okay? So if we have this kind of a relationship with God, we are loving God. What other purpose or goal could there be for such a devotee? This is the highest, there's no other goal. Anything else falls short. Any other ichha, whether it's a putrishna, lokeshna, viteshna, all those ishnas are nothing compared to having a connection with God like this. Discussions about Krishna are full of nectar. Talks of Krishna Rasa Leela pastimes are the most nectarian and should be heard with utmost faith. See, that's why we study the scriptures or even the epics, whether it could be Ramayana or it could be Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavad Puran or any other Puran. The worship of his devotee is more pleasing to Krishna than his own worship. One should perform all his bodily activities such as bathing and brushing his teeth in relation to the service of the Lord. One should glorify the qualities and pastimes of the Lord with songs and prayers. One should give his hard-earned money to his spiritual master or the Vaishnavas for arranging festivals of Krishna consciousness. One should renounce whatever wealth creates an obstacle on his path of worshipping the Lord. One should renounce all activities of material sense gratification, of which enjoying sex is the chief. One should also give up all kinds of material happiness, such as that derived from excessive attachment to one's wife and children. One should feed rice cooked with ghee to the Brahman Vaishnavas. One should offer oblations of sesame seeds mixed with ghee into the sacrificial fire while chanting Vaishnave Swaha. One should chant the holy names of the Lord without cessation. The austerity to be performed by devotees is to observe fasting on days such as Ekadashi. Hearing discussions of the Lord's nectarian pastimes is the ultimate fruit of all activities for a devotee who is free from all material desires. Unlike Jnanis who give up their sadhana, when they attain perfection, devotees never give up the limbs of devotional service. So they do not let go of the devotional service. Beginning with hearing and chanting, even after attaining perfection. In the perfectional stage of Krishna consciousness, hearing and chanting about the transcendental names, forms, qualities, and pastimes of the Lord are thousands of times more relishable than in the neophyte stage. Faith in the discussion of Hari is the only qualification for chanting the holy name of the Lord. If one is attracted to mundane topics, then one's spirit of material enjoyment will increase. The more one faithfully listens to discussions of Hari, the less his taste for material sense gratification will be manifest. If one gives up hearing and chanting topics that are not related to Krishna and always engages in glorifying the Lord, he will attain supreme auspiciousness. To hear and chant the glorification of Hari, worship the Lord, submit oneself to the Lord while offering him prayers, offer obeisance to the Lord, worship the Lord's devotee with great care and attention, and consider all living entities to be the servants of the Supreme Lord, are some of the activities by which one can quickly advance on the path of sadhana bhakti. If while practicing sadhana bhakti, one offers all his worldly and religious activities to the Lord, glorifies the transcendental qualities of Hari, gives up activities that are not pleasing to the Lord, and thus does not run after sense gratification, performs a sacrifice, observes vows, undergoes austerity, chants mantras, and gives in charity, then gradually he will develop his dormant propensity for performing unalloyed devotional service. If one's activities are directed towards the service of the Supreme Lord, one gets respite from the false sense of false proprietorship that binds the conditioned soul. So this is how he is telling us, and we have learned from other scriptures also, how to detach from this material world. Only by complete surrender unto the Supreme Lord can one attain the platform of pure devotional service. So pure bhakti, not just the bhakti which is the namesake, but not the bhakti where we are expecting something, some kind of a fruit afterwards. Pure devotional bhakti. Let's stop it here. Next week we'll start with verse number 25. And we'll see what else Lord Krishna is telling us. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaye Purnameva Visheshyate Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.